When my grandson tricked me into signing away the garden I had spent 50 years of my life creating with his grandmother, I did not shout or tear up the papers. I smiled, offered him a glass of iced tea, and let him believe his victory was complete. He saw a frail old man with ink on his fingers, but he failed to understand the most fundamental lesson of a gardener. Patience is the sharpest tool in the shed, and some roots run deeper than any lie. What he did not know could fill a library, and you are about to read the first chapter. Before we dig deeper, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what is the most precious thing someone could try to take from you? My name is Leo Martinez, and at 79 years old, my life is measured in seasons and blooms. Here in Portland, Oregon, the city of roses, my world is a 3-acre sanctuary of damp earth, dappled sunlight, and the collective memory of my late wife, Isabella. Every morning, my routine is the same. I wake before the sun, when the air is cool and still, and I walk the winding stone paths of our garden. I greet the old friends first, the climbing roses that snake up the stone walls, their blossoms heavy with dew. I run my fingers over the velvety petals of the Mr. Lincoln and breathe in its deep, familiar perfume. This is more than a garden. It is a living history of my love for Isabella. We planted the Japanese maple by the pond the year our daughter was born. We laid the stone path together, our hands chapped and sore, laughing as we argued over the curve of the walkway. Every flower, every tree, every stone holds a story. She has been gone for 5 years, but in this garden, she is everywhere. My grandson, Julian, is a man of a different world. He visits every few weeks, his sleek electric car humming silently into my gravel driveway, a stark contrast to the buzzing of the bees. He steps out dressed in sharp, dark clothes that seem immune to dirt, his eyes always scanning, assessing, calculating. He does not see a garden. He sees real estate. He speaks a language I find foreign, a dialect of spreadsheets and profit margins, full of words like synergy, brand identity, and vertical integration. He sees the love and labor of a lifetime and calls it an underutilized asset. His visits have become more frequent lately, his pitches more polished. "Grandpa," he said last week, pacing back and forth on the lawn I had just mowed, his expensive shoes leaving faint impressions in the soft grass. "We need to think about the future, about legacy. This garden, it's a world-class attraction, but it's not sustainable. We need to professionalize it, to monetize its potential." I just listened, nodding, tending to a patch of Isabella's favorite lavender. He mistook my silence for agreement, my patience for passivity. Last Tuesday, he arrived with a thick leather-bound portfolio and an air of finality. He sat me down at the old patio table where Isabella and I used to share our morning coffee. He spread out glossy pages filled with architectural renderings and financial projections. His plan was for something he called The Bloom, a high-end eco-glamping resort. The renderings showed sleek, futuristic pods nestled amongst the trees, a minimalist glass restaurant where my prize-winning orchids used to grow, and a yoga deck overlooking the pond. It was a beautiful, soulless vision. "This isn't about destroying the garden, Grandpa," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "It's about elevating it. We'll preserve the best parts, of course. We'll make your name, the Martinez name, a luxury brand." Then he slid a thick stack of documents across the table, a pen resting on top. "This just establishes a corporation to protect the property," he explained, breezing over the legal jargon. "It puts me in a position to manage the business side, to handle the investors and permits, so you can just focus on what you love, the flowers." He pointed to a clause mentioning the garden's most precious secret, the one I had been working on for over a decade. "And this," he said, his eyes gleaming, "this ensures we get the patent for the Isabella. It will be our signature, the crown jewel of the entire resort." He was talking about the rose I had cultivated in my wife's memory, a flower with petals that bled from the deepest crimson to a soft golden yellow, a living tribute to her fire and her warmth. He was talking about her soul as if it were a logo. I looked at my grandson, at his eager, hungry face, and I felt a profound and weary sadness. He had inherited my blood, but none of my heart. I picked up the pen, my hand a little shaky, just for show, and I signed every page he put in front of me. He beamed a conqueror's smile. He gathered his papers, clapped me on the shoulder, and left, promising to have his team call me soon. He drove away in his silent car, believing he had just secured his future. He had no idea that a gardener knows you cannot rush a harvest, and the seeds of his downfall were already patiently waiting in the soil. After Julian's silent car disappeared down the lane, I did not immediately reread the documents. Instead, I walked back into the garden, to the greenhouse where the single perfect bush of the Isabella was kept. I gently touched one of its magnificent bi-colored petals, a silent promise to my wife that I would not let her memory be turned into a commodity. The next morning, I took the thick portfolio to the one person I knew would see through the gloss and straight to the rot, my old friend Agnes. Agnes is 82, a fellow horticulturalist, with hands as gnarled as ancient roots and a mind as sharp as pruning shears. We sat in her cluttered, sun-drenched kitchen, the air thick with the smell of brewing tea and damp soil. She put on her reading glasses and went through the papers page by page, her silence more unnerving than any outburst. When she was finished, she took off her glasses, folded them with a snap, and looked at me over the rim of her teacup. "Leo," she said, her voice devoid of any softness, "this is not a business proposal. This is a theft. This document transfers full control of your property, your home, your entire life's work, to a shell corporation he controls. You've been erased." The words hung in the air, confirming the cold dread that had settled in my heart. The full scope of his deception was laid bare. He had not just tricked me into a partnership, he had stolen everything. My quiet 3 acres, my home, was now legally his to do with as he pleased. The betrayal was absolute. Over the next few weeks, Julian's vision began to manifest, not with bulldozers, but with an invasion of a different kind. Strangers started appearing in my garden, young, serious-looking people with tablets and measuring devices. They walked across my lawns with an air of ownership, pointing and talking in their strange, clipped language. One afternoon, I was tending to the wisteria when I overheard 2 surveyors standing near the Japanese maple we planted for our daughter. "The grade here is tricky," one said, tapping at his tablet. "But the plans say this whole section gets leveled for the infinity pool's foundation. This tree has to go." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. That tree was a living monument to my child's birth. Its branches held the memory of her learning to climb. To them, it was just an obstacle on a blueprint. Julian himself began bringing his team to the garden. He gave them tours, not of a sanctuary, but of a construction site. He never introduced me. I was just a ghost. In my own home, a stooped old man in a straw hat who was occasionally seen pulling weeds. One day, he brought a woman with severe black glasses and a sharp haircut. She was his brand strategist. He led her directly to the greenhouse to see the Isabella. "This is it," he announced with a showman's flourish. "This is the narrative. The story of a grandfather's undying love, cultivated into a priceless, exclusive bloom. It's authentic, it's marketable, it's completely Instagrammable. We'll build the entire resort's identity around it." The woman peered at the rose, not with wonder, but with a cold, appraising eye. "The color profile is excellent for social media engagement," she said. "We can trademark the name, the image, everything. We'll sell packaged bulbs in the gift shop for a fortune. They were discussing my heart, my grief, my final gift to my wife, as if it were a new flavor of soda. I felt a rage so pure and so cold, it almost took my breath away. But I simply stepped out from behind a trellis, feigning a gentle smile. "She's a beautiful rose, isn't she?" I said softly. "Would you like a cutting to take with you?" Julian shot me a look of pure panic, quickly stepping between me and the consultant. "Grandpa, no. We can't give cuttings away. This is a proprietary asset." He quickly ushered the woman away, explaining that I was an old-fashioned man who did not understand the complexities of intellectual property. His greed was so powerful it had made him blind. He saw the rose as his most valuable asset, the key to his entire venture, and he was terrified of it escaping his control. He had no idea that I was the only person on earth who knew how to properly cultivate it, how to graft it, how to make it thrive. His prize was entirely dependent on the man he was trying to destroy. My turning point came with a phone call from Agnes a week later. "Leo, the board for the Portland Rose Festival met last night," she said, her voice filled with a warmth that had been absent during our last meeting. "They want to honor you. They want to give you the Lifetime Achievement Award at this year's festival." I was silent for a moment, the weight of the honor settling on me. "And," she continued, a note of triumph in her voice, "they want the centerpiece of the ceremony to be the public unveiling of your rose, the Isabella. The whole city will be there, Leo, the mayor, the press, everyone." And that is when I saw it, the perfect stage, the perfect audience. Julian wanted to build his soulless empire on the foundation of my life's work. He wanted to use my love story as his brand narrative. I would not fight him on his terms, with lawyers and anger. I would fight him on mine with the quiet, devastating power of a single perfect rose. The festival was in 1 month. Julian would see it as the perfect launch party for his brand. He would invite his investors, his partners, his whole world, to witness his grandfather hand him the keys to the kingdom. He would be sitting in the front row, waiting for a business announcement. He had no idea he was about to witness a public execution of his dreams, delivered not with a sword, but with an act of radical, beautiful generosity. I have a question for all of you watching. Is it better to destroy what your enemy wants, or to give it away so freely that it becomes worthless to them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The news of the Lifetime Achievement Award spread through the Portland horticultural community like wildfire, and it reached Julian almost immediately. He called me that same afternoon, his voice breathless with a predatory excitement he tried to mask his familial pride. "Grandpa, I just heard. The Rose Festival. This is incredible. This is perfect." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the calculations of a hustler who had just been handed a priceless marketing opportunity for free. He saw the award not as an honor for my life's work, but as a providential piece of public relations for his resort. The conversation that followed was the moment the full, chilling extent of his betrayal was unveiled, not in a legal document, but in his own eager, greedy words. "We need to manage this perfectly," he said, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, as if we were partners in a grand heist. "The unveiling of the Isabella at the ceremony. It's a game changer. I'll have my marketing team draft a press release. We'll announce our partnership right there on stage. Imagine the headline: Leo Martinez, horticultural legend, passes the torch to his grandson to launch the bloom. A revolutionary eco-resort." I listened, my heart growing heavier with each word. He was not just stealing my land. He was trying to steal my very voice, to put his words of commerce and branding into my mouth. He wanted me to stand on that stage, a lifetime of integrity behind me, and become the folksy, homespun mascot for his soulless enterprise. I'll invite my key investors, he continued, oblivious to my silence. They'll be in the front row. When you announce the plan, it will seal the deal. We'll be fully funded by Monday. The conversation was a masterclass in his own self-deception. He truly believed we were on the same side. He believed my quiet nature was a sign of acquiescence, that my age meant I was a relic to be managed and leveraged. The betrayal was no longer just about property or money. It was about my legacy. He wanted to take 50 years of love, sweat, and dirt under the fingernails authenticity, and wrap it in a sleek, marketable package, hollowing it out until nothing of its true meaning remained. The immediate consequence of this conversation was a profound and clarifying calm. The last vestiges of my grandfatherly affection for him withered and died. I saw him not as my daughter's son, but as a stranger, a corporate raider who happened to share my blood. The sadness I had felt was burned away by a cold, righteous anger. He had given me my script for the ceremony, and in doing so, had handed me the very weapon I needed to destroy him. My days leading up to the festival became a study in quiet subversion, while Julian was busy arranging for a film crew and briefing his investors. I was in my greenhouse, engaged in the patient, sacred work of a true gardener. I began taking hundreds of cuttings from the mother bush of the Isabella. It was a delicate, painstaking process. Each cutting had to be taken from a healthy 5-leaflet stem, snipped at a perfect 45-degree angle just below a leaf node. I dipped each one in rooting hormone and carefully planted it in its own small pot of sterile, nutrient-rich soil. I filled my greenhouse, every last inch of it, with the promise of new life. Row upon row of tiny green shoots, each one a dagger pointed at the heart of Julian's business plan. Agnes became my co-conspirator. Her small, unassuming pickup truck would arrive at my driveway after dark. We would load hundreds of the potted cuttings into the back, covering them with a tarp. She then distributed them to a secret network of trusted gardeners and public arboretums across the state, from the Oregon Garden to the lush grounds of Reed College. Each one came with my personal, handwritten instructions for care and cultivation. We were creating an army of beauty, a silent, growing rebellion that was spreading across the Pacific Northwest while Julian was busy designing logos. Julian, blinded by his own ambition, noticed nothing. He saw me puttering in my greenhouse and assumed I was simply fussing over the single perfect specimen for the ceremony. He once walked in while I was carefully misting 100 new cuttings. "Pudding. In the extra work, I see," he said with a condescending chuckle. "Making sure the star of the show looks her best. That's my grandpa." I just smiled. "A gardener's work is never done, Julian," I replied. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. He thought I was nurturing his exclusive asset, when in fact I was making it as common as a dandelion, and therefore commercially worthless. The final piece of the betrayal clicked into place a week before the festival. A certified letter arrived, not from Julian, but from his corporation's legal team. It was a formal cease and desist order, a brutally cold document forbidding me from propagating, distributing, or sharing any biological material related to the rose designated as the Isabella. It stated that all rights now belonged to his company, as per the documents I had signed. It was a threat, a legal chain he was placing around my creation. He was so terrified of me, the doddering old man, accidentally giving away a piece of his treasure, that he had his lawyers threaten me. He was trying to put a patent on a memory, to put a copyright on my love for his grandmother. It was the last straw. I placed the letter on my workbench, next to a newly rooted cutting, its first tiny, crimson-edged leaf unfurling toward the light. Julian had made his choice. He had chosen the path of contracts and corporations. I had chosen the path of the garden. And a garden always wins in the end, because it knows how to grow, how to spread, how to give itself away until it cannot be contained. He thought he had me in a legal cage. He had no idea I was about to open the door and let my creation fly free. Have you ever had to choose between protecting something by locking it up or by setting it free? Share your story in the comments below. The cease and desist letter was not an insult. It was a gift. It was the final piece of evidence I needed, the black and white proof of Julian's soulless intent. I placed it carefully in a folder with the other legal documents, a tidy little collection of his corporate greed. My path was no longer just a desire. It was a moral imperative. My decision was made, not in a moment of anger, but in the quiet, sunlit peace of my greenhouse, surrounded by the hundreds of new lives I was nurturing. I would not fight his legal threats with a lawyer. I would make them irrelevant with an act of profound and public generosity. My first step was to formalize my plan. I called Agnes and asked her to arrange a meeting with the board of the Portland Rose Society. We met not in a stuffy boardroom, but in the fragrant open air of the Peninsula Park Rose Garden. I sat on a bench surrounded by blooms, the very testament to the city's love for shared beauty, and I laid out my intentions. I told them about my grandson's plan to bulldoze my garden and about his attempt to seize control of the Isabella for commercial purposes. I did not show them the legal documents. I simply told them my story, a narrative of love and legacy versus profit and branding. Then I told them my plan for the award ceremony. I would not only unveil the rose, I would gift it to the world. I would publicly renounce any patent, any trademark, any form of ownership. I would donate the thousands of cuttings I had been cultivating to the city of Portland and to public gardens across the nation, with the Rose Society as the official distributor. There was a moment of stunned silence as the board members absorbed the magnitude of what I was proposing. To turn down a fortune, to give away a rose that could be worth millions in royalties, was an act so contrary to modern thinking that it took them a moment to comprehend. It was Agnes who spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. "It's the most beautiful act of horticultural rebellion I have ever heard of," she declared. The board unanimously and enthusiastically agreed. They pledged to have the city's Parks and Recreation Department on standby, with trucks and volunteers to begin distributing the cuttings the very day after the festival. They would help me draft the official deed of gift, a document that would legally ensure the Isabella remained in the public domain forever. My plan was no longer just a personal act of revenge. It was becoming a citywide event, a celebration of civic pride over corporate greed. With the board's support secured, I moved on to the next phase, a quiet preparation for the ceremony itself. I began writing my speech. I did not write it at a desk, but on a small notepad while sitting in the garden, letting the words come to me as I worked. I wrote about Isabella, about her laugh, about the way she would get a smudge of dirt on her nose and not care. I wrote about the meaning of a garden, how it teaches us that the best things in life require patience, that beauty is not a commodity to be owned, but a gift to be shared. Every word was a seed, planted with care, ready to bloom on stage. I also began to play the part of the slightly overwhelmed, technically inept old man for Julian. He would call, bubbling with plans for the ceremony's production. He talked about lighting cues, camera angles, and a pre-produced video tribute to me that would seamlessly transition into a promotional piece for his resort. "Grandpa, my team needs a few sound bites from you for the video," he said one day. "Just a few words about how proud you are to see the garden's legacy secured for the future." I agreed, and a young man with a camera came to the house. I gave him exactly what he wanted. I spoke in rambling, sentimental tones about the importance of family and how gratifying it was to see the next generation taking an interest. I sounded like the perfect, folksy grandfather, a harmless old man ready to pass the torch. I knew my words would be edited and twisted to serve his narrative, and I was counting on it. The more he built me up as his willing partner, the more devastating the fall would be. My final preparation was the most personal. I selected the single most perfect specimen of the Isabella to present on stage. It was a flawless bloom, its petals just beginning to unfurl, revealing the breathtaking gradient from deep crimson at its heart to the soft, warm gold at its edges. I placed it in a simple terracotta pot, the kind Isabella had always preferred. It was not a flashy presentation. It was an honest one. It was a tribute, not a product. In the week leading up to the festival, Julian was a whirlwind of frantic energy. He was constantly at the garden with his investors, a group of slick, smiling men who looked entirely out of place amongst the flowers. He would point out the future location of the spa, the restaurant, the luxury yurts. He was selling them a dream, a story of authentic rustic Oregon luxury, with me and my rose as the centerpiece of the brand. He was so caught up in the performance, so blinded by the dollar signs, that he never once saw the quiet storm that was gathering. He saw a gentle, agreeable old man. He saw a priceless, exclusive rose. He had no idea that the old man was about to give the rose away, and in doing so, turn his $1,000,000 dream into a pile of worthless dirt. Before the final act, I want to ask you something. Please hit the like button if you believe in the power of quiet rebellion. In the comments below, tell me, what's more powerful, a legal document or a public promise? The week of the Portland Rose Festival arrived with a flurry of citywide excitement. The air itself seemed to buzz with anticipation. My phone rang constantly, but it was Julian on the other end, not with concern, but with logistical commands, disguised as questions. Grandpa, the production team needs to do a lighting test in your greenhouse. Is that okay? Grandpa, my investors are flying in on Thursday. I'd like to bring them by for a final walkthrough of the asset. I agreed to everything with a gentle, placid smile. I was the calm, quiet eye of his frantic, self-created hurricane. I watched him lead the investors, a group of men in sharp suits who looked deeply uncomfortable in a garden, on a tour of my life's work. He spoke to them in his slick, confident language of profit and potential. He did not point out the bench where Isabella and I sat every evening. He pointed out a prime location for a wine bar. He did not show them the ancient apple tree. That had been there for a century. He described how its removal would open up a panoramic view for the luxury suites. They nodded along, their eyes gleaming not with appreciation for the beauty around them, but with the cold, hard light of avarice. They were vultures, and Julian was leading them to a feast that he did not realize was about to be snatched away. My own preparations were quieter, but far more significant. The day before the ceremony, Agnes arrived with a large, unmarked van. It was not a clandestine operation. It was a joyful one. We were joined by a team of volunteers from the Rose Society, a group of men and women of all ages, their hands already stained with the honest dirt of gardeners. For hours, we worked together in the greenhouse, carefully loading the thousands of potted cuttings of the Isabella into trays. There was a sense of cheerful conspiracy in the air, a shared understanding that we were part of something special. We were not stealing anything, we were preparing a gift. As the van was filled, one of the younger volunteers, a girl with bright, curious eyes, turned to me. "Mr. Martinez," she asked, "aren't you sad to give it all away? This rose could make you a very rich man." I smiled and looked at the rows upon rows of new life. "Some things are worth more than money," I told her. "A memory is one of them. And a memory is meant to be shared, not sold." The van drove away, its precious cargo heading to a secure, city-owned greenhouse, ready for distribution. The mother plant, the original Isabella, remained with me, along with the single, perfect specimen I had chosen for the stage. My secret army was in position. That evening, Julian came by for a final check-in. He was buzzing with nervous energy, pacing back and forth on my patio. He handed me a set of neatly typed note cards. "Here's the speech my team wrote for you," he said, not even looking at me. "It's got all the key talking points. It hits the family legacy angle, the passing of the torch, and then smoothly transitions into the announcement of the bloom. Just stick to the script, Grandpa. This is too important to ad-lib." I took the cards from his hand and glanced at them. They were filled with his corporate, soulless jargon. They described my love for Isabella as a brand origin story. I slipped them into my pocket. "Don't you worry, Julian," I said, my voice calm and reassuring. "I'll make sure to say everything that needs to be said." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be one of partnership, but felt like a brand of ownership. "I knew I could count on you," he said, his smile wide and triumphant. "Tomorrow, we change the world." He had no idea how right he was. The final piece of my plan was a quiet act of personal defiance. After he left, I took the cease and desist letter his lawyers had sent me and walked out to the garden, to the old stone fire pit where Isabella and I used to burn the autumn leaves. I crumpled the letter into a ball, its sharp legal threats rendered meaningless. I lit a match and dropped it onto the paper. I watched as the flames consumed the corporate letterhead, turning the words intellectual property and exclusive rights into thin gray ash that drifted up into the night sky. I was not just burning a piece of paper. I was severing the last thread of his hold over me. He thought he had bound my creation with contracts and threats. But you cannot put a chain on something that is truly alive. He thought his plan was airtight, his victory assured. He was a man who believed in the power of paper, of documents, of legal possession. I was a man who believed in the power of the earth, of roots, of life itself. The stage was now fully set for the ceremony. His investors were in their hotel suites, dreaming of profit margins. His film crew was ready to capture his moment of triumph. His marketing team was ready to launch a global brand. And I, the quiet old gardener, was ready to turn his entire, carefully constructed world into compost. He was about to learn the most fundamental rule of the garden. What you sow, so shall you reap. Have you ever had a moment where everything was perfectly in place for a final showdown? Share that feeling in the comments and hit the like button if you're excited for the final part of my story. The evening of the Portland Rose Festival ceremony was a perfect Oregon twilight, the sky a soft blush of pink and orange over the rolling hills of Washington Park. The amphitheater was filled to capacity, a vibrant sea of people, from city dignitaries in pressed suits to dirt dash under dash the dash nails gardeners in their Sunday best. The air was electric with civic pride and the heady perfume of thousands of roses. I sat in the front row, a place of honor with the single, perfect specimen of the Isabella in a simple terracotta pot at my feet. A few seats down, Julian was holding court. He was incandescent with triumph, his investors flanking him like a royal guard. He wore a tailored suit, his smile flashing as he pointed me out to them, the charming old grandfather, the living, breathing heart of his brand. He looked at me and gave a sharp, confident nod, as if we were two generals about to claim a shared victory. He had no idea we were on opposite sides of the war, and he was about to walk into a massacre. The ceremony began. The mayor spoke, a local musician played, and then the lights dimmed for the video tribute Julian's team had produced. My own face appeared on the giant screens, my voice rambling sentimentally about family and the future. The video was a masterpiece of manipulative editing, seamlessly blending my heartfelt words with glossy animations of his eco-resort. It ended with a shot of my hands holding a rose, with the words, "The Bloom, a legacy reimagined," appearing below. The audience applauded politely, and Julian's investors looked deeply impressed. It was the perfect setup. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. And now, to receive the Portland Rose Society's Lifetime Achievement Award, a true legend of horticulture and a treasure of our city, Mr. Leo Martinez. I stood up, my old bones protesting just enough to make the act believable, and walked slowly to the stage, carrying my wife's rose. The applause was warm, genuine, and humbling. I placed the pot on the small table at the center of the stage and turned to the crowd. I looked at Julian, at his beaming, expectant face, and then I unfolded the small, worn piece of paper from my pocket, the speech I had written in the garden. I ignored the teleprompter that was scrolling with the corporate-approved words he had given me. "Thank you," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. "Thank you for this incredible honor. But the honor, truly, has been the life I have lived, a life spent with my hands in the dirt, alongside the woman I loved, Isabella." I paused, letting her name settle in the quiet air. A gardener learns many lessons. He learns about patience. He learns about nurturing. But the most important lesson he learns is that beauty, true beauty, cannot be owned. It cannot be contained in a contract or locked away in a vault. Its very nature is to be shared, to be given away, to grow. I saw a flicker of confusion in Julian's eyes. This was not in the script. His smile tightened slightly. I reached down and gently touched a petal of the rose beside me. For the past decade, I have been working on one final project, a rose to honor my wife's memory. It has her fire, her warmth, her strength. Its name is the Isabella. I turned the pot so the cameras could capture the bloom in all its glory. A collective gasp of awe went through the crowd. It was, even I had to admit, the most beautiful rose I had ever created. Julian was. On the edge of his seat, his face glowing with pride and avarice. This was his moment. This was the launch of his $1,000,000 asset. And today, I continued, my voice ringing with a strength that surprised even myself, I want to give this rose its first and most important job. My grandson, a man of business, believes this rose should be a luxury brand, an exclusive product to be patented, trademarked, and sold to a wealthy few. I saw the blood drain from Julian's face. His smile vanished, replaced by a mask of horrified disbelief. The investors beside him shifted in their seats, their expressions turning from smug to stone cold. "But he is wrong," I declared, my voice soaring across the amphitheater. "My wife's memory is not for sale. Therefore, as the creator of this rose, I am officially and publicly donating the Isabella to the world. I am releasing any and all claims of ownership. I am placing her in the public domain, effective immediately." One held up the formal deed of gift I had signed with the Rose Society. As of tomorrow, thousands of cuttings, which I have been cultivating for months, will be distributed free of charge to every public garden in this city, in this state, and across this country. Her beauty belongs to everyone, to anyone with a patch of dirt and a desire to see something lovely grow. That is her legacy. That is my life's work. For a second, there was only stunned silence. Then the amphitheater erupted. The applause was not polite. It was a roar, a standing ovation that washed over me like a tidal wave. They were not just clapping for a rose. They were clapping for the idea, for the act of pure, defiant generosity. I looked down at Julian. He was frozen, a statue of ruin amidst a celebration. His investors were already on their feet, not to applaud, but to leave. They did not look at him. They simply turned their backs and walked away, their faces grim. Their deal dead. Julian just sat there, alone, his face pale, his empire of dreams reduced to ashes by a simple gift. I had not destroyed him with anger or with lawyers. I had destroyed him with love. What do you think is the most powerful force in the world? Love, money, or revenge? Let me know your answer in the comments, and hit the subscribe button for the final chapter of my story. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of warmth and approval that seemed to settle deep in my bones. I stood on the stage for a long moment, clutching the award, the scent of my wife's rose filling the air, and I felt not the thrill of victory, but the profound, quiet peace of a promise kept. The rest of the evening was a blur of handshakes, heartfelt congratulations, and the sincere, teary-eyed gratitude of fellow gardeners. They saw me not as a warrior, but as one of their own who had stood up for the simple, shared love of growing. Things I never saw Julian leave. One moment he was a ghost sitting amidst the celebration. The next he was simply gone, having vanished into the night like the soulless specter he was. The following morning, the front page of the Oregonian newspaper was not about politics or business. It was about a rose. There was a large, beautiful photo of the Isabella in full bloom, with the headline, "The Rose That Money Couldn't Buy." The story detailed my public gift, framing it as a defiant act of love against corporate greed. My phone rang. All day, calls from botanical gardens and horticultural societies from as far away as New York and London, all asking how they could get a cutting of Isabella's rose. Her memory was already beginning its journey around the world. As promised, trucks from the city's parks department arrived at the crack of dawn. Agnes was there, clipboard in hand, directing a team of smiling volunteers. They loaded the thousands of cuttings from the city greenhouse and began their beautiful work. For the next week, the city of Portland was engaged in a quiet, joyful act of planting. I saw my wife's rose being carefully placed in the soil at Peninsula Park at the waterfront, in the gardens of schools and libraries. It was everywhere, a living thread of crimson and gold weaving itself into the fabric of the city. My life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. The surveyors and brand strategists were gone. The only visitors to my garden now were friends, neighbors, and fellow gardeners who came to share a cup of tea and talk about soil acidity and pest control. My home was my own again, a sanctuary of peace, its silence broken only by the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves. I never heard from Julian directly. The news of his ruin came in whispers from friends. His investors had not just pulled out, they had sued him for misrepresentation. The shell corporation he had used to steal my property was bankrupt. He had lost everything, not because I had taken it from him, but because his entire empire had been built on a foundation of sand, on an asset he never truly controlled. I heard he had moved out of his fancy downtown apartment and was living somewhere in California, trying to start over. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a deep, weary sadness for the young man who had so thoroughly lost his way. His punishment was not my revenge. It was the hollow emptiness of his own choices. One beautiful spring morning, about a year later, I was walking through the garden when I saw a young couple standing by the fence. They were looking at the magnificent mother bush of the Isabella, which was in full, breathtaking bloom. They saw me and smiled. "Excuse me," the young woman said. "Are you Mr. Martinez?" I nodded. "We just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice soft. "We live in an apartment downtown, but we have a small community garden plot. We were given one of your roses last year. We wanted you to see." She held up her phone and showed me a picture. It was a photo of a single perfect bloom of the Isabella, growing strong and vibrant in a simple wooden planter box, with the gray concrete of the city behind it. "It's the most beautiful thing in our little garden," she said. I looked at the picture, at this small act of beauty thriving in an unlikely place. and I felt a joy so profound it almost brought me to my knees. This was my true victory. This was my sweet revenge. It was not in Julian's failure, but in this. In the simple, shared beauty of a flower, in a memory of love given freely, spreading from my garden to the world, one bloom at a time. The garden had taught me its final lesson. You cannot defeat darkness by fighting it. You defeat it by planting so much light that the darkness has nowhere left to hide. That is how I got my so sweet revenge, and I would do it all over again. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you think is the best way to honor a loved one's memory.